For more on let's talk about that VAT controversy that refuses to go away, at least not anytime soon. We're being joined still with us in our Lagos studio by Dr. Emmanuel Ijewere. He's a chartered accountant and tax consultant. And like we told you earlier, he was part of that committee that established value-added tax in Nigeria in 1994. Thank you so much for staying with us. Hope you can hear us loud and clear now.
I can hear you.
The question I tried to ask you earlier, I mean, being a part of that committee that set up or established the VAT, what exactly were those recommendations that you put in place, that should have been implemented? What were the recommendations? And so far, many years down the line, have those recommendations been, put in place? Have they been followed?
Well, first, I was the chairman of the committee. It was a 28-man committee. And the first job we were given was to set up a working group to see whether the recommendation of the World Bank, so the recommendation of the World Bank that Nigeria should set up value-added tax scheme. And so we should find out whether it was feasible or not. What happened at that time was that a number of states had already started collecting sales tax. And the World Bank felt that it was a good idea they were collecting sales tax, but it would be a lot more efficient if the principles of value-added tax were applied instead. And the World Bank was fully aware of the situation that each state needed funding. They needed to have internally generated revenue. And that's why they resorted to sales tax. Now, with the committee that was set up first, which is the working committee, which I headed, was given 6 months to come back and tell the government, General Babangida's government, whether or not VAT was feasible in Nigeria. And within 4 months, because we visited every state of the Federation, and we came up with the conclusion that yes, VAT was feasible, but a number of things had to be put in place. And all these now worked together to come up with the recommendations we came with. First and foremost, it must be understood that VAT was set up as a replacement for sales tax in the various states. And our committee therefore worked on the basis of this, that because the various states had weak tax collection system in terms of manpower and so on, they needed to be helped. And so one of the first things we did was to ask that we be allowed to arrange training for them. Value-added tax was new to Nigeria, so we approached the World Bank because the federal government did not have enough adequate funding for us. And the World Bank arranged for the Institute of Tax Administration of California to come to Nigeria to train Nigerians on value-added tax. And we now went state by state. We brought in 3 people who to form the nucleus staff of each state. And we took them to now Obafemi Awolowo University, where the officials from the Institute of Tax Administration had come to train them. And it was a very successful training. We now wrote our report and did the calculation and said that for the first 5 years, the states cannot do this themselves. So set up a commission. And that commission will be the one that will be like the agent of each state. And they will pay 5% of the collection of each state. So every month, the amount of money collected in each state will be published, and 5% of it retained for administration and training of their own local people. Because in 5 years, each state should be strong enough to have enough trained people in the VAT administration. That was the recommendation we made. And unfortunately, like it turned out later, we were so shocked and we discovered what our mistake was. We presented to the Babangida administration what the estimate of collections will be in the first 3 years of the collection scheme coming on board. That's value-added tax. And it was a huge sum of money. What we eventually heard was that some people in the Supreme Military Council then felt that that kind of money should not be left to individual states. And that was where they now said, no, everything in that report was accepted, but it will now be collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service and now distributed to the states in the same way as other centrally collected monies were distributed in Nigeria. That was the situation, and that it really, really, really upset members of my committee, and the World Bank officials were shocked because Nigeria has about the same kind of situation in India, in Indonesia. We went to those countries and many other countries, and we came up with this. And to help in our report, to help the federal government, so that it can benefit from it, we said that we should do something which is unusual, which is collect value-added tax on imported goods into Nigeria, especially luxury goods. With this collection, this will go to the federal government and for distribution in the normal
Sorry,
way.
I have to cut in, Dr. Ijewere. We'll have to go on a break, and when we come back, we will definitely continue this conversation we've been discussing with Dr. Emmanuel Ijewere, the Chartered Accountant and Tax Consultant. We're coming back after the short timeout to continue with that discussion. Don't go away.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching News Night with me, Ngozi Alebu.
And myself, Ndi Amogu. Now we'll continue the chat with Dr. Ijewere. Yeah, Dr. Fine, we've had about how the estimate for first 3 years cost Babangida administration to now say, no, this has to be a federal government thing. But there's been talk of the administrative bottlenecks associated with the collection of VAT and the question of logistics and then double taxation. Could you speak to that?
Well, the whole thinking behind the value-added tax was actually to reduce double taxation. And part of the report was that, well, we were starting value-added tax at 5%, but eventually it will eventually go up to about, say, 7.5%. But the moment you raise it to 7.5%, you bring down the rate of personal tax. Because people need to understand that value tax is very attractive for countries, especially developing countries, because it gives people an opportunity to choose whether or not they pay the tax. Whereas in income tax, you don't have a choice. The government takes a decision that you pay so much for your earnings, which almost gives an impression that there's punitive tax in terms of the more you earn, the more you pay. Whereas in value-added tax, you have a choice whether you go for the luxury goods, because the basic things in life, like rent, food, transportation, did not attract any value-added tax. Whereas in the other one, when you earn your income, it is from there you pay up all these. So we felt that it was a good thing that value-added tax will slowly replace income tax, that has happened in many other countries today, especially developing countries. But one thing that surprised us is the fact that so much work went into this whole thing, and it was all directed to encourage various states to be competitive by improving their internally generated revenue machinery. This in fact was a bad situation. We also discovered that the quality of the people at that time in the state revenue departments were not very good. Only a few states were really quite good. You had the Lagos State, for example, had a very strong system, but it was not strong enough to carry out VAT at that time. They too would have had to come under the commission for about 4 or 5 years. The Federal Inland Revenue Service had very good people there as well, but none of them was trained, and there was no computerization at all. So this VAT required computerization. It required technology to be brought in to be able to handle this. This did not exist at the time. So to have done what they did was a great surprise to people. In fact, one of our members at that time, Professor Sam Aluko, may he so rest in peace, was so angry about it that he was going to launch a one-man protest because this was unfair, and therefore the Federal Executive Council of the military, the then military government, should revise what they did because it was never in the interest of Nigeria. That was the situation in 1994.
The argument, Dr. Ijewere, is that globally VAT is actually collected at, centrally or centrally administered. Will you say that Nigeria is better served if VAT is centrally administered, or is it better that the states actually, collect VAT? What would you say is the way forward?
For me, my personal view, and from what we expect, because we went around Nigeria twice, and we came to the conclusion, because of the vastness of Nigeria and the diversity that exists in the economy of Nigeria, value-added tax should be in the hands of states, because then they know the people a lot more closely. But the value-added tax in Nigeria was also modified. That's why it was called the MVAT, Modified Value-Added Tax, because we were also taxing goods, luxury goods entering Nigeria, which is not a common thing in other tax climes. So we had that kind of a challenge we were facing. But in our opinion, because Nigeria was a federation, the whole concept of the World Bank was to help the states. And this is what cascaded into our committee being set up. And I was asked to chair that committee. It was Alhaji Abubakar Alhaji, who was then the permanent secretary, told us that our main responsibility to help the states be more efficient in their tax collection, starting with VAT. So that was the concept at the time. So it's not now a question of, I don't understand the politics of it, I don't understand the law of it, but the facts of it is what I'm presenting to you.
Okay, thank you. We'll leave it there. Well, the Umahi State Governor says he's off it. He wants it to be collected at the federal level. Thank you so much. We've been discussing with Dr. Umahi Ijewere, a chartered accountant and tax consultant. Once again, thank you for being on the program.